Hello, hello, hello. So, I want to talk about something which is critically important, and that is to be in a balanced state. I was absolutely amazed. I was watching this YouTube video the other day about quantum physics, and it spoke about the range. I hope you could see it, which is actually we all are emitting frequencies. There's an aura around everybody. Some people, I have a friend that actually can see the aura has different colors. There are machines that you can see the colors. It's a frequency, it's a wavelength. Now, I mean, one of the ways of thinking of this is that sometimes we're down. You know, the feeling when you're down, it's like you have very low energy. And then other times you're like happy. Let's say if I just told you you won the lotto, you'd be like powerful, happy energy. Now, we know there's a case, and Freud speaks about this. He says, from people that have, let's say, mental illness, they're not crazy. It's just the frequency is too much on a certain side. So, manic depressive is sometimes they're too happy, and sometimes they're too sad. So, using a friend of mine, in fact, it's the same friend that can see these auras. So, he once, and this happens to many people, he got into drug-induced mania. So what is mania, ultimately? When people are manic, they can, there was a movie, I think it's called Dancing with Fire, and it was about this guy who has bipolar. So they go into mania and depression. So in the mania, he was like all happy, and police were chasing him, and he tells his girlfriend, we're going to drive into the water and the nature is going to protect us. And that is normal in a manic state. In a manic state, it's like a child. It's an imaginative state. That's because they're on a very high frequency and they're very happy. And in happiness, you go into the state of potential. In potential, anything could be, right? I can say, well, tomorrow God's going to make that, I don't know, gold will rain from the heaven. It could happen. Nothing cannot happen, right? Now, when you're in a very low frequency, you're depressed, you don't have space for happiness. So, generally speaking, this is the key thing, one of the key things of Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, and that is as follows. We can be either, and this is very interesting because it's written about hundreds of years ago in Kabbalah, and obviously science today is showing this from our brains. We can either be too happy, too much in the state of potential, and that is the right brain. That's more men. Men in general have a tendency, which on one hand that's why they're happier, but a tendency towards fantasy. And where do you see this? You see this in terms of investing. Men will invest more recklessly than women. On the other hand, they make more money because no risk, no return. So the investment is a good sign of your thinking pattern because you're talking about potential. So women tend to be much less risk takers. I remember even seeing this with my son. We have a jungle gym. I won't say it's 2 stories, but let's say like a little story high. And he's like 2 years old, and I see he's about to jump off the jungle gym. And I'm like, Elias, what are you doing? He's like, I'm going to jump. And I thought to myself, first I told him not to jump, but I thought to myself, my girls, this like at 2 years old, they would never even think they could jump off like a 2-story thing. It just wouldn't occur to them, right? So, in other words, as Jerry Seinfeld says, when boys are reading comics, they're thinking about their job options. Because when you're in the state of potential, anything is potential. Anything can happen. But if you're in the state of actual, then you really it's what's called the narrow constricted state. And really it relates to fear. Because in fear, you're trying to protect yourself. That's why a lot of women, according to one very brilliant woman that I know, are control freaks. Control freaks, they look really good and da-da-da. But really what they're doing is they're trying to make sure nothing scares them. Control freaks have a lot of order. And on one hand, it works to a certain extent in terms of raising children, making a family, they make sure they've got everything. But on the other hand, they're actually filled with anxiety. And that's not a great thing in its own right. So again, you can see how both the manic state and the depressive state, which could include an anxious state, because an anxious state is not an expansive state, it's a constricted state. Both those states are not good. So a person has to be balanced, and balance is the center. And the center is like the prefrontal. It's a very big subject. There are thousands of Kabbalistic books, etc., on this thing. But the bottom line is that a person has to be in charge of their own emotions. And that's why my Master Lubavitch Rebbe, if I may include myself, I also disagree very strongly with drugs. Why? Because what is drugs really doing? They're trying to take a person who's basically depressed. If you're happy, you wouldn't need drugs, and make them happy. But the problem is that happiness is an inside job. If you want to be happy, think happy thoughts. Think about the fact that God promised that the Mashiach will come. Think about how much better the world is today. Happiness is something, your mood is something, and this is the most critical point perhaps you'll ever hear, and it's the point of this lesson. Your mood depends on your thoughts. So, if you think positive, you feel positive. In fact, the Baal Shem Tov says, we've all been through tough stuff in our lives, and if you haven't, you probably will, unfortunately. If you can find the good in the bad becomes good. Now, today, I can never stress this enough, I've personally experienced this, people are killing themselves with watching the news. If you see, not only think bad is like, okay, that's bad, you're projecting bad. But if you see bad, right, of course you're going to feel bad. What could be worse than seeing bad? So if I said to you, okay, look, I've got this machine, and if you watch this machine, I guarantee you're going to be sad, depressed, and anxious. So you'd have to say, what kind of a nutcase would I be to watch that machine? And I'd say, well, you are that nutcase, because that's what you're doing every single day. In fact, perhaps every other minute of the day. You can't watch the news and expect to be happy. And before the 2016 election, I got so sick of the media cycle. Because what is the media ultimately? Media is just an idiot trying to sell you the most kind of debased, frightening story that they can. That's what the media is. If they could show you that somebody's getting chopped into little pieces, they would do it. They do anything because that's the media. And if you consume it, I like to say, if you're dumb enough to buy it, there's someone smart enough to sell it. That's the fact, I remember speaking to a friend of mine, who's quite a successful guy, someone else who had lost his money. So he said, a fool and his money part quickly. Why? Because a fool doesn't think. If there's a billion things to spend your money on. You could lose, literally, fact is, people that win the lotto, they go broke very, very quickly. Most of them. Why? Because you need to be in control of your thoughts, of your behavior, of what you see, of what you hear. You have to be in control. I was telling somebody that I love dearly the other day, I said, look, you need to gain control of what you consume. It's just that simple. You're going to watch the media all day. You are going to be miserable, sad, and depressed. It's just that simple. And so this is the key. Now, the key is very interesting because if you ever see the video Inside Out, very great cartoon, which really describes this concept very well, they put 5 different characters in this little girl's brain. One of the characters is happiness. Happiness always wants the person to be happy. And happiness is a tendency. We all want to be happy because we like to feel good. And happiness makes you feel good. However, there's a problem with that. And the problem is, ultimately, life is about goodness, doing goodness, creating unity and love. And therefore, happiness is really, it's like the hippies. Was the hippies about love, or was it about how I feel from love? So there's a very big difference. Like a friend of mine, a very brilliant guy, Yossi Ben Hashem, said, in the West, what we call love is really lust. People are not looking for love. They're looking for lust. And that's why relationships don't work. Because if I look for lust, I can fall out of lust. But if I look for purpose and giving and meaning and unity, then I'll stick to what is purposeful, meaningful, giving, and unifying. So these are very different energies. One is the energy of selfish, the other is the energy of selfless. And they're very, very different because even though selfish may include others, I remember being in Amsterdam. And so the bottom line is people can indulge in whatever it is, but they're not creating unity. What they're creating is just, I remember a policeman going over some kids, over the now many states, but marijuana is legal. They're drugged out of their mind, so they're in some kind of world. So what are you doing? So if you're onto drugs, you have to get off drugs. You have to figure out how to make yourself happy. I say this many times. The first thought of the day changes our train of thought. Every morning I do it. I think about gratitude and I become happy. It's very simple. And conversely, if I see myself becoming too happy, I'll pull myself down because I can now tell when my happiness levels are making me non-realistic. And so you have to become knowledgeable of your own emotions. One of the most important things that ever happened to me, my father's a very brilliant man, very great scholar as well. He said, you have to know yourself. So it took me, I just listened to my own thoughts for maybe 2-3 years. Now, I know what I'm thinking. And I can tell, I know what I'm feeling as well. I can tell if I'm feeling too exuberant, I have to pull myself down because I'm getting out of normalcy. And how do you know if you're out of normalcy? If you're not functioning, right? Normalcy is A equals B. If I'm going to do this, this will have a result. Non-normalcy is that whatever I do is going to work. It doesn't work like that. Some things are going to work, some things are not going to work. And the conversely, if I'm feeling down, I need to pick myself up. The world ain't going to come pick me up. I got to pick myself up. I could do that through gratitude exercise. If I'm feeling anxious, I could do some deep breathing. I want to share with you a very powerful story that happened to me. And what happened to me is that, thank God, I don't suffer from migraine headaches. But no, I have a doctor, he's a pain management doctor, and he said migraines always have a trigger. One of the main triggers of migraines is stress. And so I got a migraine, and I thank God I was with a friend of mine, and his aunt, she's a bit of a student of mine. She also is a doctor, and she's also kind of into Eastern stuff. And so she checked me out, and she says to me, this was her recipe, listen. She says, fear isn't real. And as she said that, I had to trace in my own mind, what was the stimulus? What was my fear that gave me the migraine? And when I traced it, and I said, no, that's not real. And of course it wasn't real. It was just something that I was afraid of. The migraine went away. And then for about a year or so, I guess I was a bit of an anxious state. Every once in a while, I would feel a migraine coming, and I would trace the fear. I would trace what was the thing I was afraid of, and I'd get rid of that fear. They say fear is false evidence appearing real, as the lady recently told me. Fear is something that you think is going to happen that won't happen. But because you think it's going to happen, it creates fear, and that itself can create a migraine. So if you can get rid of the fear, you can literally heal yourself. Now, I'm inviting you to join me on the journey of your life. I've created a course. I don't want to go into too much detail, but basically there are only 3 things that all our lives consist of. That's physical. We have a body, we have a mind, we have a heart. We have a need for income, relationships, health. We have a soul. We have a need for God, for purpose, for meaning. And we also need to balance them. There are many religions that they're unbalanced. You have people that are meditating somewhere as we speak. So they're not balanced in reality. Like we said, they're not in unity. They're in some kind of meditational nirvana drug. Then you have other people that they're kind of very grounded in this world, but they're too grounded. right? I have a friend, a businessman, but he's miserable. He's just all about his problems, and he himself would love to get rid of his problem, but he doesn't know how to because he's just so grounded in this world. So you have to have both. And that's the secret of Judaism, how to balance your life. And so I invite you to take my course, and it's academyoflife.thinkific.com. And most importantly, if you work with me and hire me as your coach, I'll teach you these skills one by one. And it's a guaranteed money back course because the skills are not mine. They come from Jewish mysticism. They've been practiced by the masters for thousands of years, and they're simple, actually, remarkably simple things like I've told you, but you just need to know them. And we'll help you, we'll guide you. And I look forward to, please God, we all are infinite. We all can literally succeed and succeed infinitely. We can always grow. I don't want to be too lengthy. It's a big subject in its own right. But join me to grow infinitely.